Dacă îți place această poveste, nu uita să te abonezi la canal pentru a primi mai multe narațiuni captivante ca aceasta. Acum, hai să ne adâncim în această călătorie de depășire. Blițul aparatului foto a strălucit a treia oară, făcând-o pe Julia să clipească din marele ei ochi căpri. Fetița de 6 ani și-a ajustat poziția pe scaunelul din prima linie a fotografiei de familie de Crăciun, netezind cu mândrie pliurile rochiei ei galbene brodate cu margarete albe. Era prima dată când participa la ritualul anual al fotografiilor Henderson și alesese rochia ei preferată pentru ocazie. "Julia, draga mea, uită-te la cameră și zâmbește", a instruit fotograful cu o răbdare exagerată. Mica a ascultat, afișând un zâmbet care dezvăluia lipsa unui dinte din față. Mânuțele ei se țineau ferm de marginea scaunelului în timp ce încerca să rămână perfect nemișcată. În spatele ei, mama ei, Megan, privea cu un amestec de mândrie și neliniște. "Mamă,
Chiar crezi că e necesar ca Julia să poarte această rochie galbenă? Nu se potrivește deloc cu tema noastră de culori", a șoptit Agnes Henderson, bunica Juliei, către străbunica fetiței, Eleanor. Comentariul, deși spus cu voce joasă, a fost perfect auzit de Megan, care a rămas tăcută, fața ei tensionându-se aproape imperceptibil. Restul familiei era îmbrăcat în nuanțe de roșu, verde și alb, culorile tradiționale de Crăciun. Becky, sora lui Megan, purta o rochie elegantă roșie care se potrivea cu puloverul verde închis al soțului ei, Jason. Fiul lor, Ryan, de 8 ani, purta pantaloni negri și o cămașă albă cu un mic papion roșu. Părinții lui Megan, Agnes și Robert Henderson, erau asortați în nuanțe de verde profund. Numai Megan și Julia ieșeau în evidență. Megan purta singura rochie formală pe care o avea, un model simplu bleu marin pe care îl cumpărase la reducere pentru un interviu de muncă, iar Julia, cu rochia ei vibrantă galbenă, strălucea ca un mic soare în mijlocul iernii de Crăciun a familiei Henderson. "Perfect, acum toți împreună!" a exclamat fotograful. După sesiune, în timp ce toți se împrăștiau pentru prânzul de duminică, Megan a observat privirile de dezaprobat pe care mama ei le arunca către Julia. Nu era nimic nou. De când se întorsese acasă la părinți cu o fiică de 1 an, după dispariția tatălui copilului, Megan simțea greutatea judecății constante. "Julia, vino să o ajuți pe bunica să pună albumele de fotografii la loc", a chemat Eleanor, străbunica de 92 de ani, observând cu atenție interacțiunea dintre membrii familiei. Era singura persoană, pe lângă Megan, care arăta adevărata afecțiune față de fetiță. În acea noapte, după ce a adormit-o pe Julia în mica cameră improvizată din mansardă, un spațiu pe care îl împărtășeau de când se întorseseră acasă la Hendersonii, Megan și-a permis să plângă în tăcere. Pereții subțiri nu ascundeau vocile venind de la parter. "Această rochie galbenă va strica complet estetica cardurilor de Crăciun", se plângea Agnes. "Întotdeauna putem cere studioului să ajusteze digital fotografiile." "Sunt de acord", a răspuns Robert, tatăl lui Megan. "La urma urmei, este prima dată când reușim să adunăm toată familia Henderson pentru un portret adecvat după ani." Întinsă pe patul ei improvizat, Megan se uita la tavanul înclinat al mansardei, în timp ce amintirile copilăriei ei se amestecau cu prezentul. Povestea părea destinată să se repete, cu Julia acum ocupând rolul de outsider pe care Megan l-a jucat întotdeauna. Ceasul digital marca 5 dimineața când Megan s-a trezit. Mansarda era rece, vechiul radiator funcționând cu greu în această iarnă deosebit de aspră. S-a ridicat cu grijă să nu o trezească pe Julia, care dormea înfășurată în 3 pături. S-a îmbrăcat repede și a coborât scările înguste ale mansardei. În bucătăria tăcută a început să pregătească cafeaua pentru familie. De așa cum făcea în fiecare dimineață de când se întorsese acasă la părinți cu 2 ani în urmă. În timp ce apa fierbea, ochii ei au zărit peretele din sala de mese, vizibil prin ușa bucătăriei. Acolo, perfect aliniate, 10 de fotografii spuneau povestea familiei Henderson, sau, cel puțin, versiunea pe care părinții ei au ales să o păstreze. Becky la primul ei recitat de pian, Becky primind un trofeu la fotbal, Becky la balul de absolvire, Becky în ziua anunții cu Jason, Ryan, fiul lui Becky, în prima zi de școală. Fotografii cu Megan erau rare, doar fotografiile școlare obligatorii și câteva imagini de la absolviri. "Te-ai trezit de vreme?" Vocea lui Eleanor, străbunica, a făcut-o pe Megan să tresară. Femeia în vârstă mergea încet cu ajutorul unei bastoane sculptate, un cadou pe care Megan îl dăduse de Crăciunul trecut. "Bună dimineața, bunico! Vrei o cană de ceai?" "Te rog, draga mea." Eleanor a șezut la masa din bucătărie cu oarecare dificultate. Am avut o noapte neliniștită. Aceste pereți vechi nu păstrează secrete prea bine. Meghan a dat din cap înțelegând referința la conversația pe care Eleanor o auzise cu siguranță noaptea trecută. Nu este corect ceea ce fac cu tine și cu Julia, a continuat Eleanor, ochii ei albaștri încă strălucind cu perspicacitate în ciuda vârstei înaintate. Niciodată nu a fost corect ce ți-au făcut și ție. Este doar modul în care stau lucrurile în familia Henderson, a răspuns Meghan cu o ridicare din umeri pregătită, punând ceasca de ceai în fața bunicii. Nu trebuie să fie așa, a spus Eleanor, ținând mâna lui Meghan cu o fermitate surprinzătoare. Sunetul pașilor pe scări a întrerupt conversația. Agnes Henderson a intrat în bucătărie, deja impecabil îmbrăcată la 5:30 dimineața. Bună dimineața, mamă, Meghan! Tonul cu care a pronunțat numele fiicei purta o răceală aproape imperceptibilă. Cafeaua este gata? Încă puțin, a răspuns Meghan, întorcându-se spre cafetieră. Excelent! Robert și cu mine mergem la studioul foto în această dimineață pentru a finaliza cardurile de Crăciun. Au sunat aseară spunând că au nevoie de câteva aprobări pentru ajustări. Eleanor și Meghan au schimbat o privire semnificativă. Ce fel de ajustări? A întrebat Eleanor, deși știa deja răspunsul. Doar câteva retușuri de iluminare și culoare, a răspuns Agnes vag, nimic important. 3 zile mai târziu, o cutie mare a ajuns la reședința Henderson. Agnes a deschis-o cu entuziasm în camera de zi, scoțând cardurile de Crăciun ambalate în hârtie de mătase. Au ieșit perfecte, a exclamat ea, întinzând un card lui Robert, care a zâmbit cu aprobat. Meghan, care cobora scările cu un coș de rufe de spălat, s-a oprit văzând agitația. Julia venea imediat după, sărind cu bucurie. Au sosit cardurile de Crăciun? A întrebat fetița, alergând spre cameră. Pot să văd cum a ieșit fotografia noastră, mami? Agnes a ezitat un moment înainte de a-i înmâna un card nepoatei. Julia l-a luat cu mânuțele ei mici, fața ei iluminându-se de anticipare. Zâmbetul Juliei a dispărut treptat în timp ce ochii ei s-au plimbat peste imagine. În portret, familia Henderson pozase armonios în vestimentațiile lor de Crăciun în roșu, verde și alb. Meghan era acolo, în rochia ei albastră, parțial ascunsă în spatele lui Becky. Dar scăunelul mic din față, unde Julia se așezase cu atâta mândrie în rochia ei galbenă, era gol. Mamă, a șoptit Julia, ridicându-și ochii confuz spre Meghan, unde sunt eu în fotografie? Silence that followed Julia's innocent question seemed to amplify the ticking of the old wall clock of the Hendersons. Meghan felt the blood drain from her face as she looked at her daughter, her small hand holding the Christmas card where she should have been present, but had been digitally erased. Well, dear, interjected Agnes cu un artificial sweet tone, we had to make some adjustments to the photo. Your beautiful yellow dress, while lovely, simply didn't match the color scheme we planned for Christmas. Julia furrowed her brow, slowly processing the meaning of the words. You took me out of the photo? Only for the Christmas cards, dear, explained Agnes, avoiding Meghan's accusing gaze. We kept the original photos in the digital archive, of course. But why? Julia's voice trembled slightly. Did I do something wrong? Of course not, my dear, replied Robert, clearly uncomfortable. It's just a matter of aesthetics. What is aesthetics? Asked Julia. It means you were standing out too much and ruining the harmony of the photo, Agnes said, her patience clearly running thin. The yellow dress just didn't work. The words hit Julia like a physical blow. Her lips trembled and tears began to form in her eyes. So, I ruined the family photo? Before Agnes could respond, Meghan dropped the laundry basket and knelt beside her daughter, taking the card from her hands and placing it on the coffee table. No. My love, you didn't ruin anything, Meghan said firmly, looking directly into Julia's eyes. Your yellow dress was the most beautiful in that room. You were perfect. Meghan, don't be dramatic, sighed Agnes. We're just trying to maintain a quality standard in our... No, interrupted Meghan, her voice firmer than it had ever been in front of her parents. I won't let you do this. Not with her. Eleanor, who had been silently observing from the entryway, moved to join them. Agnes, the matriarch said in a surprisingly strong voice, What you did was cruel and unnecessary." "Mother, please," Agnes replied, irritated. "You don't understand modern photography or family marketing. Our Christmas cards are our personal brand among friends and colleagues." "Family marketing?" Megan repeated incredulously. "She's your granddaughter, not an inconvenient accessory." Robert cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. "Perhaps we're all overreacting a bit. They're just Christmas cards." "No, Dad," Megan replied, standing up and holding Julia's hand. "They're not just cards. It's about the same standard you've always set. Becky has always been the investment, and I've always been the expense, the burden, and now you're doing the same with Julia." That night, after putting Julia to sleep, the girl had cried softly until she dozed off. Megan remained seated on the edge of the small bed, stroking her daughter's hair. The attic felt even colder and more hostile. On the opposite wall, a small crack in the plaster had been covered with tape, a temporary solution that had become permanent, just like her situation in her parents' home. A light knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Eleanor entered slowly, carrying a cup of hot tea. "How is she?" the great-grandmother asked, handing the cup to Megan. "She fell asleep crying," Megan replied, her own voice choked. "She asked if she could only wear red, green, and white clothes from now on." Eleanor shook her head sadly, sitting down with difficulty in a nearby worn chair. "This can't go on, Megan. You know that, don't you?" Megan nodded, wiping away a stubborn tear. "I started looking for another job, something that pays better than the convenience store. Maybe a second job at night when Julia is sleeping. But rents are so high, and with Julia's school expenses—" "No," Eleanor interrupted, her blue eyes shining with determination. "It's not you who should leave." In the weeks following the Christmas card incident, a subtle shift occurred in the Henderson family dynamic. Megan, typically resigned and silent, began to demonstrate small acts of resistance. She refused to prepare breakfast for everyone as she had always done, leaving only the coffee pot ready. She stopped washing her parents' and sisters' clothes, taking care only of hers and Julia's. And, most significantly, she stopped apologizing for the existence of both of them in that house. Agnes and Robert noticed these changes with growing irritation, but surprisingly, they did not confront their daughter directly. Perhaps they were bothered by the disapproving look Eleanor cast every time the subject came up indirectly during meals. One Wednesday afternoon, while Agnes and Robert had gone out for lunch with friends and Becky was busy taking Ryan to swimming practice, Megan found Eleanor in the house library, surrounded by documents spread over the old oak table. "Grandma, is everything okay? Do you need help with something?" Megan asked, noticing the concentrated expression on the elderly woman's face. Eleanor looked up, adjusting her reading glasses. "Oh, Megan, dear, actually, I'm working on something important. Please close the door." Intrigued, Megan obeyed and approached the table. The documents seemed official, with stamps and signatures. Some of them bore the logo of the law office Wilson & Associates, the same one that had handled the family's legal matters for decades. "These are legal documents," Eleanor explained, answering Megan's unasked question. "I'm making changes to my will and some other provisions." Megan seemed uncomfortable. "Grandma, we don't need to talk about this. I know it's not a pleasant subject and—" "No, dear, we do need to," Eleanor interrupted firmly. "I'm 92 years old. It's a miracle that I'm still lucid enough to make decisions for myself, and that's exactly what I'm doing." Eleanor pushed one of the documents toward her granddaughter. "This house, Megan, belongs to me, not to your parents, as they would like everyone to believe. When your grandfather passed away 25 years ago, he left it to me, not to Robert. I allowed them to live here because it was convenient for everyone, especially when I started needing more care." Megan looked at the document, a deed with Eleanor Henderson clearly identified as the owner. "I didn't know that," Megan admitted, surprised. "I always thought the house belonged to my parents." "They certainly act as if it does," Eleanor replied with a discreet eye roll. "But no, the house is mine, and I'm modifying my will to ensure that, after my passing, it goes directly to you and Julia." The shock on Megan's face was evident. "Grandma, I don't know what to say. It's very generous, but my parents, they're going to be furious." "Yes, certainly," Eleanor completed with surprising calm. "But there's more. I'm not just modifying my will, Megan. I'm exercising my right as the owner." The elderly woman slid another document across the table. Megan took it with trembling hands, her eyes widening as she read the title. Eviction notice. "Grandma, this is an eviction notice. Yes, for your parents, not for you and Julia," Eleanor explained, a determined glint in her eyes.
"I gave them 30 days to find another accommodation." Megan sank into a nearby chair, stunned by the revelation. But where will they go? And why now? Eleanor sighed deeply, removing her glasses and rubbing her tired eyes. "I've watched for decades how they've treated you, Megan. I've seen how they've favored Becky, how they've ignored your dreams and needs. I stayed silent for too long, convincing myself that it wasn't my place to interfere in the way they raise their daughters. But when I saw what they did to Julia, when I saw that little girl cry because she was literally erased from the family story," Eleanor's voice faltered momentarily, the emotion evident on her wrinkled face. "I realized that my silence made me complicit, and I can't allow that." Megan stared at the documents, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions coursing through her body. A part of her felt an undeniable vindictive satisfaction with the idea of her parents facing the consequences of years of unfair treatment. Another part felt guilty for her involuntary role in this family conflict. "I know what you're thinking," Eleanor said, perfectly reading her granddaughter's expressions. "You're wondering if this is fair, if it's too harsh." Megan nodded silently. "Dear, justice isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it's painful, but it's necessary to heal old wounds and prevent new ones." That same night, during dinner, Eleanor announced her decision to Agnes and Robert. The initial shock quickly turned into indignation, then into open anger. "This is absurd," Agnes exclaimed, throwing her napkin on the table. "You can't just kick us out of our own house." "It's not your house, Agnes," Eleanor replied calmly. "It never was." "It's manipulation on her part, can't you see?" accused Robert, pointing at Megan, who remained silent at the other end of the table. Julia clinging tightly to her hand under the tablecloth. "She filled your head with lies, taking advantage of your old age." Eleanor laughed, a surprisingly jovial sound given the tension of the moment. "I'm 92 years old, Robert. I'm not senile. My mind is clearer today than it has been in years. Perhaps it's the proximity of the end that brings this clarity." "We'll contest this," Agnes threatened. "We'll call Wilson immediately. He's been the family lawyer for decades. He'll understand that you're being manipulated." "Wilson and Associates is my lawyer, not yours," Eleanor corrected, "and they were the ones who prepared these documents following my precise instructions. You have 30 days. The next morning brought an escalation in the conflict that no one had anticipated. Megan woke to the sound of raised voices downstairs. Dressing quickly, she descended the stairs to find 2 police officers in the living room, along with a woman in a suit carrying a folder of documents. Agnes and Robert stood by, wearing triumphant expressions. "What is happening?" Megan asked, her heart racing at the sight. "Miss Megan Henderson?" one of the officers asked. "Yes, that's me." "We received a report of potential elder abuse and undue influence," the officer explained. "Miss Agnes Henderson alleges that you are exercising improper influence over your grandmother, Eleanor Henderson, to obtain financial and real estate advantages." Megan felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at her parents, who maintained expressions of false concern. "This is absurd. I would never." "We also have a representative from Adult Protective Services," the officer continued. indicating the woman in the suit. She will need to speak with Miss Eleanor Henderson to assess her mental state and determine if there is any coercion. At that moment, Eleanor appeared in the doorway, leaning on her cane, her back straight despite her advanced age. Her gaze, far from showing confusion, revealed a controlled indignation. "Good morning, officers," she said in a clear, firm voice. "I see my daughter and son-in-law have decided to escalate this family conflict." The representative from Adult Protective Services stepped forward. "Miss Henderson, I am Amanda Lewis, a social worker. I would like to speak with you privately to discuss some concerns that have been brought to our attention." "Certainly, Miss Lewis," Eleanor replied. "But first, I would like to make it clear to everyone present. I am fully in control of my mental faculties. I made the decision to modify my will and issue an eviction notice of my own accord, without any influence or coercion from my granddaughter Megan." Agnes stepped forward, her face contorted with a mix of anger and desperation. "Mother, you are not thinking clearly. Megan is manipulating you, can't you see? She has always been envious of what we gave Becky, always resentful for not receiving the same." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "It's interesting that you recognize the disparity in treatment, Agnes, but continue to justify it. No, I am not being manipulated. I am finally acting after years of watching injustices that I allowed due to my own cowardice." The social worker observed the interaction closely, occasionally making notes. "Miss Henderson," Robert interjected, "think about what you're doing. We're talking about your own daughter. Where will we live? Do you really want to see us on the street?" "You won't be on the street, Robert," Eleanor responded with a weary sigh. "You have considerable savings, and Becky could certainly help you, considering all you've invested in her over the years. As for Agnes being my daughter, yes, she is, and I love her, but love does not mean allowing cruel behavior without consequences." At that moment, Julia descended the stairs, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Upon seeing the strangers in the room, she stopped abruptly, running to Megan's side. "Mommy, what's happening?" she whispered, clinging to Megan's leg. Amanda Lewis, the social worker, observed the interaction between mother and daughter with professional interest. "This is your daughter?" she asked Megan. "Yes, this is Julia," Megan replied, wrapping a protective arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Perhaps we can continue this conversation without the child present," Amanda suggested. "Officers, I believe we can proceed with a private interview with Miss Eleanor Henderson now." The following days were a whirlwind of official visits, assessments, and increasing tension in the Henderson home. Eleanor underwent a full mental evaluation, which confirmed what everyone who knew her already knew. She was perfectly lucid and capable of making her own decisions. Adult Protective Services closed the case, concluding that there was no evidence of abuse or manipulation. The eviction notice remained valid, as did the changes to the will. However, Agnes and Robert did not give up easily. In a last desperate effort, they threatened to contact Child Protective Services, claiming that Megan was not financially capable of caring for Julia. "If you go through with this," they warned during a tense confrontation in the kitchen, "we will inform the authorities that you can barely support your daughter. Think about it, Megan. Do you want to risk losing custody of Julia?" That was the last straw. Eleanor, who had been listening quietly from the kitchen doorway, entered with a determined look on her face. "Enough," she exclaimed, striking her cane on the floor with surprising force. "You threatened to take a child away from her loving mother out of pure vengeance. This goes beyond any acceptable line." Turning to the landline phone on the kitchen wall, Eleanor dialed a number she knew by heart. "Wilson, Eleanor Henderson speaking. I want you to expedite the eviction process and prepare the documents for immediate transfer of the property to Megan and Julia Henderson. Yes, today." Agnes paled. "Mother, you can't do this." "I just did," Eleanor replied, hanging up the phone. "You have 48 hours to leave, and if you approach Julia or threaten her well-being again, I will add a restraining order." 6 months later. The spring sun filtered through the new curtains in Julia's room, creating dancing patterns on the freshly painted walls in a soft yellow hue. The 6-year-old, almost 7 now, sat at her new desk, drawing intently with colored pencils. Megan watched from the door, allowing herself a moment of pure gratitude before announcing her presence. "Julia, great-grandma Eleanor is calling for lunch." The girl turned, her face lighting up with a genuine smile. "I'm coming, Mommy. I'm finishing a drawing for the family album." Megan approached to see her daughter's artwork. It was a simple yet charming drawing. 3 stick figures representing her, Julia, and Eleanor, all holding hands in front of a house. The sun in the upper corner had a smiling face, and the sky was dotted with fluffy clouds. But the detail that made Megan's heart ache was the yellow dress with daisies that Julia had drawn on her own figure. "It's beautiful, my love," Megan said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "We'll put it on the fridge after lunch." "No, Mommy, it's for the album. Great-grandma Eleanor said we can make our own family album now." The words were simple but laden with meaning. Their own family album, a new story being written. In the kitchen, Eleanor was supervising lunch preparation, sitting at the table due to mobility limitations. At 92 and a half, she still maintained the same lucidity and determination, although her body was gradually giving in to the weight of the years. "Oh, there you are," Eleanor smiled as she saw them enter. "Julia, dear, did you wash your hands?" The girl rushed to the nearby bathroom to fulfill the pre-lunch ritual, leaving Megan and Eleanor momentarily alone. "Have you heard from them?" Eleanor asked, referring to Megan's parents. "Not directly," Megan replied, setting the table for 3. "Becky called yesterday. Apparently, they asked to live with her and Jason, but she refused. She said they are going through financial difficulties and can't accommodate anyone else." Eleanor shook her head, a complex expression passing over her wrinkled face. "The irony is not lost on me," she commented. "After all the years investing in Becky and neglecting you, it's she who refuses to help them when they need it." "According to Becky, they managed to get a small 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of the city," Megan continued. "It's not the standard of living they are used to, but it's a roof." "And how do you feel about that?" Eleanor asked, observing her granddaughter closely. Megan paused. "Part of me feels a satisfaction that I'm ashamed to admit," Megan confessed quietly. After years of being the second-class daughter, seeing Becky, the perfect daughter, the lucrative investment, refuse to help them when they needed it, there's a certain poetic justice in that. Eleanor nodded in understanding. "And the other part?" Megan sighed, adjusting the utensils that were already perfectly aligned. "The other part feels sorry for them, not because they don't deserve to face consequences, but because they truly believe they are the victims of this story. In their minds, they've never done anything wrong. They simply prioritized the daughter who seemed more promising." "People rarely see themselves as villains in their own stories," Eleanor reflected. "Agnes probably thinks I was cruel and unfair in making this decision." "Do you regret it?" Megan asked, looking directly into her grandmother's eyes. The Eleanor considered the question for a long moment. Regret finally acting after decades of complicit silence? No. Regret causing pain to my own daughter? Yes, that hurts me. But I chose between 2 evils, allowing the pattern of cruelty to continue affecting a new generation, or intervening dramatically to break it. At that moment, Julia returned, hands raised to show they were clean. "See, Grandma? Clean." "Excellent, my love," Eleanor smiled. "Now we can eat." Lunch passed with a tranquility that still felt new to Megan. No underlying tension, no disapproving glances, no passive-aggressive comments. Just 3 generations of Henderson women chatting and laughing as they enjoyed a simple yet delicious meal. After lunch, as promised, Megan helped Julia organize her drawing in the new family album that Eleanor had bought. It was a simple album with a blue synthetic leather cover, nothing compared to the elegant bound albums Agnes used to display on the living room shelf. "Let's put it here on the first page," suggested Eleanor, pointing to the empty space. "Every family album needs to start with a story." Julia carefully glued her drawing to the page, using the glue stick Megan had bought specifically for the project. Beside her, on the same page, they placed a recent photograph of the three of them, taken by a helpful neighbor in the backyard, all smiling widely at the camera, Julia proudly wearing her yellow dress with daisies. As she watched her daughter decorating the edges of the page with small hand-drawn yellow daisies, Megan felt a wave of emotion wash over her. They were not rich nor glamorous. The house, although spacious, needed repairs in several places. Megan's job at the local bar, which supplemented her daytime work at the convenience store, barely covered the basic expenses and savings for Julia's future education. But for the first time in her life, the Megan felt she had a real family, a family where she and her daughter were not tolerated inconveniences, but fully valued and loved members. That night, after putting Julia to sleep in her own room, no longer an improvised space in a cold attic, Megan found Eleanor in the living room, calmly flipping through an album of old photographs. "May I join you?" Megan asked. "Always, dear," Eleanor replied, patting the space beside her on the sofa. Megan sat down, watching the photographs her grandmother was examining. They were images from decades ago. Eleanor, young, holding baby Agnes, the late grandfather of Megan beside them. "You know," Eleanor began, her voice soft with reminiscence, "when Agnes was little, I vowed to be different from my own mother, that I would never make my daughter feel less loved or valued than she deserved." She turned the page, revealing more photographs of Agnes's growth. "And I believe I was. Agnes was a deeply loved child, perhaps loved too much, in a way. I never imposed limits on her, never made her face consequences. I thought that was love." Megan remained silent, allowing her grandmother to continue her reflection. "When I saw the same pattern repeating, Agnes obviously favoring Becky, I realized I had failed as a mother in another way. I didn't teach my daughter empathy, nor responsibility for her own actions." Eleanor closed the album gently, placing it on the coffee table. "Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing by disinheriting my own daughter, if I wasn't going too far the other way." Megan placed her hand over her grandmother's. "I don't know if there's a clear answer to that, Grandma, but I do know you saved me. You saved Julia. You broke a cycle that could have continued for generations." Eleanor smiled sadly. "Perhaps one day Agnes will understand that this was not done against her, but for you, for Julia, and, in a way, for herself too. Sometimes we need to lose something to realize its true value." In the upstairs room, in her soft yellow room, Julia slept peacefully, her yellow dress with daisies carefully hung in the wardrobe, no longer a symbol of exclusion, but of identity and belonging. On the bedside table next to her bed, a small frame contained the only photograph from the Christmas photo shoot that Eleanor had secretly kept. The original version, before the digital edits, where Julia smiled proudly in her yellow dress, sitting on the front stool, fully present and impossible to erase. If you enjoyed this story of overcoming and family justice, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, give us a like, and share in the comments your own experiences with family dynamics. Stories like this remind us of the importance of valuing each family member and the transformative power that small acts of courage can have in our lives.